Okay, this is Nathan Gabay. He's going to talk about, does expansion dilute the talent base? This is a fun intro, described by an NHL owner as a young man who did a research project on all the things that expansion teams do wrong. Nathan focuses his research mostly into the oft-neglected realm of expansion-related analysis and history. As a native of Columbus and a hockey fan of over 3 decades, he's had a front-row seat to see both how new teams operate and how existing teams navigate the challenging expansion landscape in the past and into the future.
Thank you. Yeah, funny story. When I saw that particular quote written, I showed it to my wife and I said, look at that, I'm apparently a young man. And she looks at me and goes, yeah, you keep telling yourself that. So anytime that expansion is discussed, ooh, missing a few lines there. Oh well. Anytime that expansion is discussed, we always hear it dilutes the talent base. It dilutes the talent base, the league will be worse as a result, and so on. It is regarded as a foregone conclusion. To the best of my knowledge, nobody in over 5 decades since the NHL's first initial wave of expansion has ever bothered to address this. So I figured, here's what I'm going to do. Create a database of every single player and player season in NHL history, so roughly 8,000 players and 48,000 player seasons, and so that none of the first-timers here at all feel intimidated, I decided to do it in Microsoft Excel. This took me between 350 and 400 hours, and I do not recommend doing that. Regardless, it can be done. If you're sitting here and you've thought to yourself, I don't have tracking software, I don't know how to program this, if you have an inquisitive and an analytical mind, you can do it. That's ultimately what this really comes down to. I also built a second database, also in Excel, of every single game in case I want to look at team scoring effects, which I did. Second line from the bottom, question sanity. You better believe that happened more often than I care to think. That got split up a little bit strangely. Okay, so for every single player season, this is how it looks within the database. I'm just going to show this. So what we have, I had to key in every single player's birth date in order to reorient in case I want to do a little bit of age-related analysis, which I did, which meant resetting it. And then for every single player's season, did he play 2 years ago or more? Did he play last year? Did he play the year after? Did he play 2 or more years down? And then also if he had a Calder-eligible season, which leads off into another kind of interesting thing by itself, then I have that. So this is Rob Zamner, who is a 1998 Olympian for Team Canada. He absolutely deserved to be there. If you disagree with that, you are wrong. Jason Zent played only parts of 3 seasons. You can see how that looks. He never had a Calder-eligible season. Ilya Zubov played 2. And then last year, this is Sergei Zinoviev. He is what I refer to as a 4N player. As in, no, he did not play 2 years ago. No, he did not play the year before. No, he did not play after. No, he did not play 2 or more years down the road. The 4N part is going to be important in just a moment. So the assumption coming in is that every player who's played an NHL game possesses something called NHL talent. It is useful at that particular moment in time. That changes from year to year. 30 years ago, enforcers had a great deal of value, not so much anymore. There was a time when offensive defensemen did not have any real value around the league. That changed. It ebbs and flows. But in the case of expansion, if we have a bunch of players coming in who are regarded as not NHL caliber, there will be evidence all over the place. To the best of my knowledge, this has never been analyzed. I'm going to skip these, that anyway. The other thing is I did all of this analysis, compiled this database. I had no idea if I was actually going to find anything or not. So I put 350 to 400 hours in, and I didn't know if I was going to find anything at all. So a diluted league equals a bad league, which will normally be an unbalanced league. And it stands to reason that it's the fault of the expansion teams. They come in, they bring in essentially non-NHL players, as they're often referred, and then they cluster all the way at the bottom of the standings. It just happens all the time. So we see competitive imbalance, frequency of blowout games, just all sorts of goofy stuff. Now this here is the number of skaters on a year-to-year basis. Expansion years are in red right there. So you can see there's these big jumps, not unexpected. Competitive balance is something that is rarely addressed. This is what a 100% unbalanced league will look like, in which half the teams go 82-0, half go 0-82. That's perfectly balanced right there. We can go through these formulas in a little bit. But this is competitive imbalance over time. Again, expansion years are in red right here. So we can see that there are, in fact, little jumps and little ebbs and flows, but it's not a sustained process. It returns back towards a normal baseline. Goal differential, this is over time. These barely move. This is between 1.8 and 2.2 goals per game is the average margin of victory at any point. Expansion has a very minimal impact on any of this. Blowout games, we would expect to see teams getting blown out. Doesn't really seem to have much of an impact. It jumps in an expansion year, but it trails back just as quickly. It doesn't ratchet up. Player age, that will be for the full presentation at a later point. But then we talk about the 4N players here, the ones who only play within one given year. Now that massive spike, that's 1943-44. The middle of World War II, 25% of the league never played another game before or after that season again. And once again, in the expansion years, we see these little jumps. It returns right back to normal. This happens very quickly. This is not something that we see that you would expect. Then we come to Vegas most recently 2 years ago. Well, if that's a diluted league right there with a bunch of terrible players that are coming in right there, how did Vegas end up at the top of the Pacific Division in their first year and end up in the Stanley Cup Finals? Now, this is only 3 or 4 points out of, I found roughly 13. I'm working the full presentation. It will end up on my website. You can follow me on Twitter, just at Nathan Gabay. We would expect to find all sorts of evidence of a terrible league or something. We don't. It simply does not last. These effects dissipate very quickly, and in short, there's just not enough evidence to support the idea that expansion causes short-term or long-term damage to the league and the product on the ice.